July 3rd, 2009. It's a muggy summer night in Augusta, Georgia, as residents try to get some rest before the impending holiday.
Augusta has like a small town feel, quaint, normally quiet town.
Augusta is a great city. It's very family oriented. It's 2 hours away from the mountains, 2 hours away from the beaches.
On the north side of town, Roger Campbell is settling in for the evening around 11:40 p.m.
He's getting ready for bed. He hears a noise outside.
And it's soon clear the commotion isn't July 4th fireworks.
As he was walking towards the window, he was hearing screams as well.
He sees several men running from the house across the street. Seconds later, he sees a young woman running and screaming.
In the doorway of the residence, Roger sees something else that makes his heart stop.
He sees a man laying on the floor, and it looks like his neighbor, Miguel Hernandez.
Roger grabs his phone and immediately calls 911.
He tells police they need to get there right away, and that it looks like his neighbor is seriously injured.
First responders race to the scene.
They know they don't have much time if they want to save this man's life.
But what police don't yet know is that there's an unsuspecting young girl at the center of this crime. One who hasn't even celebrated her 18th birthday yet. As a young child, Cassietta Felton was given a stable, structured life.
I got raised with my grandparents, actually. I didn't live with my parents. It was like church every Sunday, school every day, you're not missing a day of school.
Cassietta received a lot of discipline and structure, but it was a lot of love, and she appreciated it all. She went to a great school. They lived in a wonderful neighborhood, and she just really loved being with her grandmother.
But the structured upbringing Cassietta had become accustomed to eventually came crashing down.
My grandmother got sick at the age I was 12 and a half, going on 13.
Eventually, her grandmother was too ill to care for her. So she moves in with her mother and her mother's boyfriend.
It really broke my heart that I had to go back because I didn't want to go back. My mother was living in a rough neighborhood that you call the hood.
There was a stark comparison between the life that she had with her grandmother compared to the new life she has with her mother.
Her boyfriend was an alcoholic. He did drugs. At the age of 13 and a half, he started doing some unusual stuff, like touching me.
Cassietta decided she couldn't stay at her mother's home any longer.
I packed my things and I left.
She couldn't no longer take the sexual abuse. She needed to leave in order to find safety. She didn't know where she was going, but she felt like the streets would be better than living in a home being sexually abused.
I went from house to house. I barely ate. Sometimes I ate, sometimes I didn't. It's some people that I hung around, of course, and that was women that were older than me. They was leading me in the wrong direction. Like going to the club with fake IDs, doing drugs, having sex for money, just to survive because I was only 13.
After 2 years of surviving on her own, Cassietta finally got a welcome request from her mother.
Her mother was no longer with her abusive boyfriend, and her mother asked her if she would come home.
When my mom decided to leave her boyfriend, all she said was, "I want you to come home."
Although Cassietta was happy to get out of the street life, she still had very mixed emotions toward her mother. because for 2 years she lived on the street trying to navigate life, trying to fend for herself.
So when I got home, it got better. But that hurt was still inside of me.
After everything she'd been through, Cassietta took on a protector role over her younger siblings.
When she came back, it was like she never left. Cassietta was fun, loving, a sister that was just everything. She made sure we were okay. She was like a second mom when my mom wasn't there.
And Cassietta would soon find someone she thought could be her protector. It all started one sunny day in the spring of 2008.
One day, she was like, let's walk to the store. And I was like, okay, let's go.
Every time we went to the store, we would walk in this neighborhood. So we just walk in. And the next thing you know, these boys was trying to talk to me. And I was just like, I'm trying to go to the store. I don't have time.
But there was one young man who caught Cassietta's attention.
So he was the boy out there cutting grass, dirty, everything. I thought he was cute. So that's who I wanted to talk to.
The young man mowing the lawn was 16-year-old Brandon Steplight. Cassietta could not take her eyes off of Brandon.
I could tell that we really liked each other because we both was nervous. And it took us a little minute to exchange numbers. And we kept smiling at each other. Like we could both feel that connection.
After that day, Cassietta and Brandon became inseparable.
Me and Brandon started off as friends, and as we started spending more time together, that's when our connection started getting even deeper. He stayed with his uncle, I stayed with my mom. I wouldn't never do no cooking. He would do all the cooking. So I would just eat and he cooked. And that's just how we connected, you know? We would be around each other like every day.
Cassietta introduced Brandon to her family, and they fell in love with him almost as quickly as she did. And on the surface, it seemed that Brandon was like gonna be the best influence.
Brandon was Cassie's knight in shining armor. In my mind, I was like, maybe he's a good match for her. Maybe she'll grow up, become the woman that she really needs to be with him, and they can just rule the world together.
No one foresaw just how differently things would actually go.
She had no idea how much trouble Brandon was about to rope her into.
I just heard a whole bunch of commotion. Then I heard one gunshot.
At 16 years old, Cassietta Felton thought she'd finally found happiness after a life of struggle and abuse.
Cassietta was back in school. She was amongst her peers. She was doing well. She was flourishing.
It was around this time that she began dating Brandon Steplight, who was also 16 years old.
Cassietta and Brandon had two different beginnings. Cassietta lived in low-income housing, come from an impoverished environment. Brandon, he grew up as a suburban kid. So they did have differences, but it didn't stop their connection from growing.
Brandon was loving and supporting of Cassietta and her entire family.
It would be times to where we really wouldn't have no food, and Brandon would get up and go get food for the whole house to make sure we eat and everything.
But Brandon would soon show another side of himself when his own cash flow began to dwindle. July 3rd, 2009. Augusta police have just arrived on the scene of a late-night shooting where 30-year-old Miguel Hernandez has been found unresponsive.
Miguel Hernandez was found shot to death. He was killed by a single gunshot wound to the chest.
As CSI combed the scene for clues, detectives turned to the neighbor who called 911, Roger Campbell.
So they did interview Roger Campbell there at the scene. Campbell tells them that he heard the gunshot, went out to investigate, to look to possibly see what happened, and as he's doing this, he sees several Hispanic males running from the scene, along with an African-American female.
Roger says he didn't recognize any of the individuals he saw running from the home.
Unfortunately, the identity of these people was still a mystery at that point.
And to make matters worse for police, they don't find any useful evidence in their sweep of the home.
There were little forensic evidence at the scene of the crime, so the detectives didn't have much to go on.
It's not until the next morning, as Augusta residents begin celebrating the July 4th holiday, that detectives get their first big break in the case.
A man named Oscar White walks into the sheriff's department and wants to speak to someone about the case.
Oscar says he was there that night, but he had been too afraid to come forward until now.
The reason for Oscar's hesitancy gives detectives pause.
It was a party with an underage girl who was being paid to dance for them.
He knew he could get in big trouble for coming forward, but he also wanted to get justice for his friend Miguel.
Cops suspect the underage girl must be the same girl Roger Campbell saw running from the scene.
Oscar tells detectives that on the night of the murder, he and his friends had been having a great time until a sudden knock at the door changed everything.
Miguel Hernandez went to go answer it.
Once Hernandez opens the door, is confronted with this man.
The man had a gun and demanded money.
Hernandez says, "I'm not going to." A gunshot goes off, and it appears that Hernandez is hit, falls back into the floor and collapses.
Oscar said that once Miguel was shot, chaos erupted in the house. He said that everyone started screaming and running, and the robber ran away as well.
Detectives ask Oscar to provide them with the names of the other individuals at the party that night, including the underage dancer.
Oscar says the dancer was a friend of Miguel's, but he didn't know her name.
After they let Oscar leave, they contacted the other party goers to try to corroborate his statement.
The other men confirmed the incident appeared to be the result of a robbery gone wrong, but none of them are able to provide the name of the young dancer.
Something seems fishy about this to investigators. Either they really didn't know her name, or they were trying to cover themselves from getting in trouble from being at a party with an underage girl.
Either way, detectives are nowhere nearer to discovering the identity of the masked gunman. They blast the story out into the press, hoping someone will come forward that knows something.
They knew there had to be someone out there who knew what happened. They just had to find that person.
On July 12th, police are in luck.
They received a call from a neighboring law enforcement agency stating that one of the inmates had possible information on the murder of Miguel Hernandez.
The young man name was Ethan Cruz. He was arrested in a neighboring city for unrelated crime.
Augusta detectives head to the facility where Ethan is being held to follow up on this promising lead. Ethan agrees to tell police what he knows if they'll reward him with a lighter sentence.
After consulting with prosecutors and investigators, they agreed to these terms. They were desperate at this point.
Ethan said that he had been hanging out with his friend, Brandon Steplight, when Brandon said he needed to get something off of his chest.
Ethan asked him what was wrong, and that's when Brandon said that he had shot and killed a Hispanic man a few weeks earlier.
According to Ethan, that's all Brandon wanted to say about the incident. He didn't really give him any more info.
When Ethan heard of Miguel Hernandez's murder, he knew that that must have been the guy that Brandon was talking about.
Armed with their first solid lead, Investigators put out an APB for Brandon's steplight.
They were surprised to discover that the suspect was only 16 years old.
And police don't have to look far to find the teen.
They learned that Brandon's steplight had been living in the basement of his uncle's home.
Brandon stayed with his uncle. He had the house to himself more often because his uncle always worked.
Police move in to make an arrest, but Brandon isn't the only person they find at the home.
All I heard was, get on the ground, get on the ground, get on the ground.
On July 13th, 2009, Augusta police have the home of 16-year-old murder suspect Brandon Steplight surrounded.
Brandon was wanted for the murder of 30-year-old Miguel Hernandez.
Brandon lived with his uncle, but his uncle was usually away at work during the day.
Officers order Brandon to come outside with his hands up.
Officers did not want to go inside and have him to face someone in a home, possibly armed.
The door slowly swings open, and police come face to face with Brandon. But they quickly realize he's not alone.
He had a young girl with him who identified herself as Brandon's girlfriend, 16-year-old Cassietta Felton.
All I heard was, get on the ground, get on the ground, get on the ground. When I looked at Brandon looked like he wanted to run. I was like, don't run because they're gonna shoot you.
Cassietta saw how terrified Brandon was, and she could see on his face his desire to run. She begged and pleaded with him to follow the officer's instructions because she didn't want anything to happen to him.
Fortunately, Brandon heeded his girlfriend's warning.
Brandon surrendered himself peacefully and was taken into custody.
They cuffed Brandon up, put Brandon in the car, and then they got me.
Police asked Cassietta to come down to the station with them to answer some questions, and she agrees.
Since she seemed to be hiding out at Brandon's house with him, they figured he may have told her something about the shooting.
We got in the car, we went down to the police station. They placed me in one interrogation room, they placed him in one interrogation room.
Detectives tell Brandon Oscar's account of that night and also tell him that they believe that this was a premeditated robbery attempt.
To their surprise, Brandon admits to being there that night. He's ready to tell them everything.
Brandon is young, scared, and he just wants this to be over with. Brandon said that it all started when he had been hanging out with his girlfriend, Cassietta Felton, earlier that day.
They had been talking about doing a robbery for some quick cash and thought Miguel and his friends were the perfect targets.
Cassietta knew Miguel from her time living on the streets, and she also knew that his friends hired girls to dance at parties.
The plan was for Cassietta to distract the men by dancing for them, and then Brandon would bust in and hold them at gunpoint.
But things didn't go as planned.
Once Brandon got the signal from Cassietta, he approached the door, but it was locked.
Cassietta was supposed to leave the door unlocked so Brandon could walk right in, but she seemed to have forgotten. He decided he would just have to knock and hope that Cassietta would be the one to answer.
The thing is, Cassietta wasn't even in the room at that time.
Brandon began banging on the door, and seconds later, Miguel answered. But that's when all hell broke loose.
Suddenly, Miguel lunged at him, and he wasn't expecting that.
Steplight's statement to law enforcement was that he shot him in self-defense.
Brandon was so in shock that he fled the scene without taking any money, and without Cassietta.
He was so frightened that he essentially left her behind to fend for herself in all the chaos.
Detectives asked Brandon where he hid the weapon.
He says a couple days later, he sold the gun for $50 to a white male he only knew as Ghost.
Thanks to Brandon's statement, investigators now know that his girlfriend, Cassietta Felton, is the mysterious dancer from the party that night. They're eager to speak with her next, to see if her story lines up with Brandon's.
When they came to me, they asked me what was going on. So I told them I wasn't talking without a parent and guardian. So they stepped out, the police stepped out of the interrogation room. I guess called my parents, that's what they say. Next thing I know, they come back in the interrogation room with me. I still don't know what's going on with Brandon because we in separate interrogation rooms.
That's when investigators drop a bombshell on Cassietta.
They revealed to her that Brandon has told them everything.
They was trying to use against me, oh, Brandon said you did it, Brandon said this.
But would Cassietta's version of events be the same?
Like, y'all actually saying that I did this when I didn't do this?
Police knew someone wasn't telling them the truth.
On July 13th, 2009, 16-year-old Cassietta Felton is being interrogated by Augusta police for her connection to the shooting death of 30-year-old Miguel Hernandez.
Cassietta's boyfriend, Brandon Steplight, has already admitted to being the shooter, but he claims that she was in on the whole thing with him and helped him plan it out.
Cassietta finds herself in an interrogation room with detectives telling her that she set up Miguel to be robbed and murdered.
When detectives tell Cassietta that her man has thrown her under the bus, she's in shock.
They asked me like, we know you did it, and stuff like that. Getting smart, they talking to me any kind of way. So finally I just get frustrated. Like, y'all actually saying that I did this when I didn't do this? I kept saying I didn't do it.
Instead, Cassietta tells an entirely different story.
According to Cassietta, there was no plan to rob anyone. She does admit that her and Brandon were in need of some quick cash, but robbery was never in their plan.
Cassietta says Brandon knew she used to dance for money when she was living on the streets, and it gave him an idea.
Brandon tells Cassietta, well, what if you start dancing again?
Cassietta really didn't want to go back to this situation, but she was aware that this was an easy way for her to be able to attain the money that they needed.
She had danced for some men before at this apartment, and she felt like she could go back and do it again. She didn't really want to do it, but if he felt that they really needed it, then she would do it.
Brandon was her everything, and she wanted to show up and protect him like he had protected her. So she reluctantly agreed. On July 3rd, she went there to see if there was a chance that she could dance again for money.
The men accepted Cassietta's offer and invited her inside.
There was only one person that I knew in that apartment, which was Miguel. So when I went and danced, it was just supposed to be me dancing, getting my money, and leaving.
But nothing that evening would go as planned.
So everything was fine. Everything was okay. Miguel went to the bathroom. When Miguel went to the bathroom, one of the men had touched me a certain way. And I asked the man to stop touching me. He was very aggressive and mean with it.
All of the sexual abuse and the exploitation that she experienced on the streets as a child came flooding back.
Cassietta left the room and immediately called Brandon.
And I told Brandon, like, listen, I'm uncomfortable. I don't feel right. Something is just not right.
Seconds later, Cassietta heard a ruckus coming from the living room.
All I heard was English and Spanish, and I just heard a whole bunch of commotion. Then I heard one gunshot.
Cassietta says she rushed back into the living room to see what happened.
People are yelling and screaming and running.
My friend Miguel is laying on the floor. I just kept telling him to breathe, and I just wanted him to live.
Even though she wanted to stay with Miguel and get him help, she got swept up with the others. Everyone is scared. No one knows who has a gun or who might get shot next, so Cassietta runs.
I left. Then the next thing I know, on the way going out, I can hear the sirens.
Cassietta ran all the way home.
When I got home, I was covered in sweat, tears, and everything. Like, I was just so scared.
And she was surprised to see Brandon there, waiting for her.
We were talking, and I was like, I was there in that apartment. I was like, that was my friend Miguel that got hurt. I don't know if he survived or he died. And then that's when Brandon started saying, like, I'm scared, I'm scared and I don't know what to do. So at that point, I'm thinking in my head, like, we were both there the whole time.
That's when it really sunk in that Brandon was the shooter.
In July of 2009, Augusta detectives are sitting down with 16-year-old Cassietta Felton, who's being questioned for her part in a robbery gone wrong that led to the death of 30-year-old Miguel Hernandez.
Cassietta's boyfriend, Brandon Steplight, has already admitted to being the shooter. But her story is pretty different than his.
Brandon said that he and Cassietta had come up with this elaborate robbery plot, but Cassietta denies this.
She claimed she had no idea anyone was going to be robbed, let alone shot.
I thought that I was gonna be able to get there and dance and they pay me my money and I leave. But it didn't happen like that.
Cassietta tells detectives that she was completely taken aback when she learned what her man had done.
I was young, I was scared, and I was mostly hurt because someone had lost their life over nothing. I felt like real bad. Like, I even feel bad to this day now because I feel like I could have saved him. Miguel wasn't supposed to die.
The next day, Cassietta's mother could tell something was wrong.
I was in my room. I was kind of like distanced once that happened. So it's like when the mother they know their child, like when something is going on. She came in the room. She was like, I need to talk to you. And I was like, okay, Mama.
Cassietta decided to be honest with her mother about what happened.
She said, I know you didn't kill nobody. She said, but I was wrong place at the wrong time and just made a really messed up decision. She said, just know that I love you, you're my child, but this situation here, I can't bring you out of. She said, I'm gonna be there the whole way, but I can't bring you out of this situation. She said, so just be prepared for it. And then she walked out.
Not knowing what else to do, Cassietta says she and Brandon decided to lay low at his uncle's house until police arrived 10 days later.
I was scared, I was afraid. I didn't know what to do because I felt like me and Brandon was gonna be gone for the rest of our life.
Despite Cassietta's insistence that she was an innocent bystander in the crime, police charge her with first-degree murder.
When the story came out that Cassie got arrested and she'll be going to prison, it was hard. It was like, we're just gonna be here to support her and do what we can.
I had 5 charges on me. I had first-degree murder. I had aggravated assault. I had firearm during the commission of a crime. I had armed robbery, and I had attempted armed robbery.
Brandon Steplight was also charged with the same exact offenses as Cassietta.
My first lawyer was a woman. She was rude. She really didn't care. Every day she comes to visit me, she would tell me, oh, if you find guilty, you're going to be looking at life plus 45. My mother's sitting there crying. So finally, I just lost it. I was like, I don't want you as a lawyer. I will find another lawyer. And I told my mama to stop crying. It's going to be all right as long as we got God in our lives.
But was everything really going to be all right for Cassietta? With her story differing from Brandon's, it would be up to the court to decide who was really telling the truth.
She was facing serious time. She might be spending what are supposed to be the best years of her life in prison.
2 black kids, somebody died. All they worry about is sentencing somebody, putting them away.
July 2009. 16-year-old Cassietta Felton and her boyfriend, Brandon Steplight, have both been charged with the murder of 30-year-old Miguel Hernandez.
Investigators decide to charge both of the teenagers as adults.
Brandon has admitted to investigators' version of the event, that this whole thing is the result of a robbery gone wrong.
Cassietta, however, has told a different story.
According to Cassietta, there was never a plan to rob, and she had no idea Brandon was going to shoot Miguel.
Prosecutors aren't buying Cassietta's version of events.
Once prosecutors had the opportunity to compare the various witness stories and statements, they believe that Cassietta went to the party knowing that Brandon intended on robbing the guests. And to them, that makes her equally culpable in the eyes of the law.
State's attorneys decide to offer Cassietta a deal.
He came to me, he said, well, the DA want to drop all your charges and just offer you attempted armed robbery. The judge will decide 1 through 25 to sentence you.
But in order for Cassietta to get the reduced sentence, she has to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter.
So I was just so tired and exhausted and just ready to get it over with. I had already been sitting in the county for like a year and some change. I talked to my mother. My mother said, well, Cassietta is better than having first-degree murder and all the other charges. So I went on and took the voluntary manslaughter. I really didn't have no choice.
Brandon also makes a deal with prosecutors and agrees to plead guilty to first-degree murder.
He was in court with me. We stand up to get sentenced. They placed us in front of the judge. The judge said, Cassietta Felton, read the charges. I give you a 15 serve 12. Then he turned to Brandon and said, Brandon, Dizelle Steplight, I give you 30 with parole.
To this day, Cassietta denies the version of events Brandon told investigators.
2 black kids, somebody died. All they worry about is sentencing somebody, putting them away, and that's it.
She believes that Brandon was under duress while being questioned by investigators, and that's why he admitted to everything.
Well, Brandon told me why he confessed. He said that he made a mistake in his life. It wasn't on purpose. He didn't mean for that to happen. He said, I need to be a man and own up to my responsibilities and do what I need to do.
Once in prison, Cassietta continued to grieve the loss of her friend, her freedom, and her man.
So when it came to the beginning of my sentence, I stayed in trouble all the time. And when you go to prison, you have to defend yourself. You have to fight, because if you don't, they're never gonna respect you.
She spent most of her first 6 years in lockdown.
But after those 6 years behind bars, Cassietta realized she needed to make a change.
Really, what helped me was my Bible, God. That's who brought me through it. That's who got me through it. It was God.
Cassietta decided to stop fighting and start pursuing her GED.
I was like, okay, I'm gonna enroll myself in GED class. It'll be helpful for me because I really need it, for myself. And then maybe when I get home, I could teach my brothers and sisters,
She would email me, good morning, I done read my Bible, I'm getting my GED, I done passed my classes. And when she told me that, I run to my mama, look, Cassie said she didn't pass her English and her math.
Thanks to her newfound good behavior, Cassietta was released from prison a few years early, on September 14th, 2020.
Cassietta was released from prison 2 weeks before her 28th birthday.
I did almost 11 and a half years in prison. When I first got released that day, I got me a pack of Newports, got me a Snicker bar, an ice cream. I laid back on the concrete. I fired the cigarette up, and I was just looking at the sky, just crying. I was like, I'm free. I just kept saying I'm free.
Today, Cassietta is working and spending time with her family.
I have had 2 jobs since I've been out, and right now I'm just really focused on me, adapting back to society, getting used back, to the real world.
Her life has changed marvelously, and everything is on the right track.
As Cassietta moves on with her life, she is staying out of trouble, but still communicates with Brandon.
At 16, I really loved Brandon, and I still love Brandon.
She's still in contact with him while he's serving his sentence, and she hopes that one day they can be together again.
Brandon was the one person that protected her, that showed up for her. He was there for her when she didn't have any money, when she didn't have anything to eat. And seeing that he needed money, she wanted to be there for him just like he had been there for her.
If I could turn back the heads of time, I wouldn't even been there. I would have just stayed at home.
If anyone sees Cassietta's story, I want them to understand that love is powerful and love can make you do some crazy things.
I hope that younger girls, they learn to stay away from negativity, stay away from violence, stay away from people that are not good for them, because it's easy to get in trouble and it's hard to get out of.
When you put your full trust in someone, it can be a slippery slope. Especially when you're young, it's hard to know what's best and to follow your conscience. But if you don't remember to listen closely, you could end up in a dark place you never expected.